Will Kashtira ruin Master Duel? If you still need a beautiful playmat, you can go to zerodamagegaming.com and use code Solemn for a discount. There's actually a brand new drop of 2-player cloth mats, and they are absolutely gorgeous. They're super soft, super pristine. Link will be in the description. Again, use the code Solemn for a discount. So now the topic at hand. We all know Kashtira will come at some point in the near future in Master Duel. Of course, we can all make educated guesses when, but the fact is, it will come sooner rather than later. So now I will be going over the most important cards you need to be aware of, and also what kind of impact we can expect, because these cards are absolutely crazy. I want a regional with Kashtira. I think the engine is absolutely insane, but there's a lot to talk about right here. So these are kind of the most important cards in the deck. However, there's one thing to talk about, and that is that if Kashtira Arise Heart isn't part of this for some reason, it also completely changes the power level of the deck, but less so than you might think. But more on that later. So for now, let's go over the cards. First of all, we have Raid Sot, the field spell. This card essentially says search for any Kashtira, and now you get a bunch of attack on your board for every single different attribute on the field. Also, after a Shangri-Ira activated its effect, it can pop something. So this card is very, very powerful and multifunctional because it has 3 effects. It's a searcher, it outs floodgates, and it gives attack buffs. It is very, very powerful, and it's also the main way this deck gets its consistency. Now in the OCG, this card is, I believe, at 1, but in the TCG, it's at 3. Next, we have Kashtira Birth. This card is essentially infinite follow-up in a single card. Some people say that this is actually the most broken card in Kashtira. It says that level 7 monsters can be normal summoned without tributing, which can sometimes come up. And it also makes tunes better, fun fact. But most importantly, it allows you to special summon Kashtira monsters from your banish or graveyard back to the field. This means that if your opponent gets rid of your board, but there's still a Kashtira Birth on there, you will be able to rebuild boards out of nowhere. And finally, after your opponent activated a spell and you have a Kashtira monster on your field, you can actually start banishing face down certain cards from their graveyard. This is especially powerful against Branded, also powerful against Runic. For the final spell, we have Kashtira Theosis. This targets a Kashtira monster on the board and then special summons a Kashtira monster with a different attribute from your deck. Note that when the TCG and the OCG first got Kashtira support, this card was missing and this card was also missing. And of course, Arise Heart was also missing. So what's very interesting is some people might be thinking, hey, if this card were for some reason not part of the first Kashtira wave, then this will be way weaker, just like in the TCG and the OCG back then. But what they forget is that these 2 crucial cards, which are some of the best extenders in the whole archetype, were missing as well in the TCG and OCG. So we actually have a very, very different type of engine on our hands, even with this missing. Now, of course, I'm not saying that this card isn't uber powerful. We'll get to that later. It is probably one of the most broken cards in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. But again, food for thought. Now we get into the Kashtira monsters, and we start with the 2 most important ones right here. Kashtira Unicorn is the most powerful starter in the Kashtira deck. It can search for a Kashtira spell from your deck, meaning Birth or Theosis. It can banish stuff from your opponent's extra deck face down, and just like Fenrir, it can also be special summoned from your hand if you don't control monsters, meaning it's kind of like a Cyber Dragon on steroids. Unicorn, interestingly, is also a 1-card Arise Heart in the TCG and the OCG, because you can literally go special summon Unicorn for free, Unicorn search Theosis, alright, activate Theosis, special summon Fenrir from your deck, Fenrir effect, add Rise Heart to your hand, special summon Rise Heart becomes level 7, overlay all of them into a Rise Heart, boom. A 1-card Arise Heart, just like that. You still have 4 other cards in your hand, and this thing by itself is already crazy. Now you might be thinking, oh, but if we don't have this, that's completely different. But even then, Kashtira Unicorn is still a 1-card crazy combo. The next card, however, is the most important here, and that is Kashtira Fenrir. Even if no other Kashtira card is released, this card by itself changes Master Duel. If you think Tier was annoying before, get ready for Tier 2.0. Because there's another Kashtira card, Tearlament's Kashtira, and Fenrir can search it. In fact, Fenrir can search any Kashtira monster. This also makes it so Fenrir is actually a 1-card combo that can make literally anything in the game. If I asked you right now, I want you to make a board with all the Egyptian god cards and Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon and also Kashtira Arise Heart all on your board, you could probably do it with just one Fenrir. One Fenrir is every combo in the game, kind of in the same way Tour Guide is. Of course, I'm not saying how many bricks you need to run for decks like that. I'm not saying that kind of deck would ever be viable, but it's interesting to know. Fenrir is like the best starter in the game. And it's not just that. Fenrir can also simply search itself, so it's never really minusing, while also banishing stuff from the field face down. So it's removal, it's a starter, it's an extender. It is one of the most broken cards ever printed in Yu-Gi-Oh! And the second this card is released into Master Duel, you should expect it to be in almost every deck, regardless of if it's a Kashtira deck. Sprite will play this. Tyr will play this. Scareclaw will play this. Labyrinth might literally play this, even though this card has nothing to do with Labyrinth, because you can still discard the second copy you searched for a furniture, and then you still have a free Fenrir, which is a crazy boss monster on its own. So don't sleep on this card. Even if everything else in Kashtira gets banned to 0 for some reason, Fenrir will still completely change the game. Of course, Fenrir is even stronger in decks where you have Kashtira monsters that also gain value. So for example, since Kashtira Fenrir can search Scareclaw Kashtira, Fenrir is extra good in a Scareclaw deck. Since Fenrir can search Tearlaments Kashtira, Fenrir is extra good in a Tearlaments deck, and so forth. And of course, it's good in a Kashtira deck, that's obvious. Next we have Scareclaw Kashtira. This is just another extender, can special summon itself, but it can also negate monster effects whenever certain monsters battle. And so this helps Kashtira deal with some of the weird towers and boss monsters. Next we have Rise Heart, which can special summon itself if you already have a Kashtira on the field, and it can also make itself level 7, whilst also banishing cards from your opponent's deck. Next we have Big Bang. I don't really want to talk too much about Big Bang because there's going to be a lot of combo videos I can make with this deck once we do get it into Master Duel, and then you'll actually see its proper purpose. Tearlaments Kashtira is, if you hated Tearlaments, I'm very sorry, but this card is going to completely change Tearlaments, honestly. Just these two cards being added into Tearlaments in Master Duel right now, Jesus Christ. If it wasn't tier 0 anymore, it goes straight back to tier 0. It's actually that insane. I literally still play Tearlaments in the TCG right now, where every single card is limited to 1 and Kid Close is banned, and purely because of these cards, and in particular Tearlaments Kashtira, Tearlaments can still keep up, even after all those bans. So yeah, this is absolutely crazy. Wow. Without a Rise Heart to potentially check Tearlaments, and again, I'm not saying that would be the case, that, back to tier 0 hell. Now, for the XYZ monsters, we have two right here. We have Shangri-Ira and we have Rise Heart. So Shangri-Ira starts zone locking your opponent, and this is probably a meme you've seen before in the Yu-Gi-Oh community, where people get all of their zones locked, so all the spells, all the traps, all the monsters on live streams, and that's good fun, you know, a nice fun mechanic, absolutely. You don't get to play the game Lamao, but it can also special summon other Kashtira monsters from the deck. So even without this card, you can still probably do like zone locking from your opponent, while also special summoning things like Fenrir, and that way have removal, zone locks, and so forth. So there's definitely still something there. And together with the field spell, like I said before, it can also out floodgates. So if there's like a nasty floodgate on the board, Shangri-Ira activates to do something, then the Raid Sot can just pop it, because it's a spell effect and not a monster effect. Next, we have Rise Heart, and this is actually the most broken card. This card says every single card that goes to the graveyard is banished instead. It's literally Macrocosmos. But it also has 3000 attack and attaches cards to itself as material whenever something is banished, and it can also banish any card face down once per turn. It removes everything, it banishes everything. It is an absolutely crazy card. And if Kashtira has all of its cards along with this, Kashtira is probably the best deck. Now I know some people might say like, oh, Tyr is actually going to be better. No, it's not. Kashtira at full power and Tyr with all of the hits it has right now, and probably even more by the time this drops, Kashtira will be the best deck, and it will not even be close in my opinion. The fact that Tyr has no in-engine out for this card, so it has to draw an out or just scoop, makes this card automatically better. The only way for that not to happen is when Tyr is so ridiculous at full power that they are just fine with the auto scoop sometimes. But in its current state, Tyr is no longer YCS Leon level. And so with a Rise Heart, Kashtira is the best deck by far. However, let's just say that we don't have a Rise Heart. Let's just say that this is our core. Will this deck still be good? In my opinion, actually yes. And the reason is this deck can still play Shifter. So a bunch of decks are still auto losing whenever you open your shifter. Your end board here actually isn't bad. If we still have Diablosis, we can still do crazy zone locks. Like, you can still make your opponent never ever play the game. You can have like double Shangri-Ira with a Fenrir and a bunch of zone locking, or like Shangri-Ira Diablosis with a Fenrir and a bunch of zone locking, and your opponent doesn't get to play, so it doesn't really matter. Of course, a Rise Heart would make it way better, but you really don't have to discount what kinds of boards this deck can make even without a Rise Heart. However, the most important part about this engine isn't its going first, honestly, if we don't have this. What's way more important is its going second, because this deck honestly has some of the best going second gameplay this game has ever seen. These cards, Kashtira, Unicorn, and Fenrir, are Cyber Dragons on steroids. You know, you just special summon them out. And the second you special summon one of these, your opponent needs to do something. Because if this card gets to add another copy of itself, that means if you remove it afterwards, it's game over. But if you remove this card on summon and you have another copy in your hand, lamao, you just wasted your interaction. Similar story with Unicorn. But if you don't stop Unicorn, now they can add something like Theosis and they get their free Fenrir and they just keep on going like that. So it's extremely hard to make a board that actually beats Kashtira going second. Beyond that, the engine of this deck is very small. So it's entirely possible to have like 17 or 20 non-engine cards to break literally any board in the game. Again, not even adding to the fact that whenever you open Shifter, you're probably auto-winning as well. So even if we don't have this buddy right here, it's entirely possible that we see some kind of blind second Kashtira that just absolutely obliterates all the other decks. I'm honestly fairly certain that if we get all of these cards at full power, that I would be playing Kashtira to rank up. Because don't forget that going second, you don't really use this. Now, of course, sometimes you might put it on your end board if you couldn't OTK, but the power of Big Eye and just the Kashtira monsters themselves, which are basically boss monsters already, is what makes this deck so good going second. And of course, also getting a free Zeus and so forth. So of course, we will not know until we see a pack drop that contains these cards. I don't know how soon that will be, but I do think even in this situation, this engine is still incredible. I think this will still be crazy, of course, for Tearlaments. I think this will be good for Scareclaw. I think this by itself will be run in literally everything, but I think even in this setup, this will probably be one of the best decks still. Now, of course, if you add this on top, I think this is the best deck and there's no competition whatsoever. Hope you found this interesting. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Again, if you still need a beautiful playmat, go to zerodamagegaming.com, check out that brand new cloth playmat drop, and I will see you soon. Ciao.